Hey there, highlighters. Erin King here. And today I could not be more stoked to connect you with one of my absolute favorite humans, one of my dearest Instagram buddies who has become a real friend, Amber Lilyestrom. Amber, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Erin. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh my gosh. Well, I have been such a fan of yours on Instagram. I've seen all of the work you've been doing. Your podcast is incredible. Your books are my favorite. I love your poetry, your writing style, all of it. So there's so much we could be diving into today. But at time of recording, it's the end of January 2022. And your book, Master Your Money Mind, is just so perfect and so timely for those of us gals looking to really tap into that next level of abundance for this year. So I feel like your book is just the perfect read. And I'd love to dive into some of the content. So before we do, I want to hear a little about your money story. Like, I know that you and your husband had this incredible house that you've renovated, and you've been an entrepreneur, and you're homeschooling, and you're pursuing these incredible new dreams this year. As usual, you have just so many exciting things to talk about. But what is your money story?
Thanks for asking. I think mine's probably pretty similar to a lot of people's money stories. I grew up with parents that did the best that they could, and I was very blessed to grow up in a middle class family. And there were a lot of challenges when it came to the financial aspect of our story. And I remember as a young child just being a really perceptive kid and being emotionally pretty evolved from a very young age, and knowing that things were tough in ways that maybe my parents didn't want me to know, but I could just tell. And I remember this one moment, I tell this story in the book. I was around like 8 years old or so, and I remember my mom and I she would watch like Lifetime movies. Sometimes she just like have them on, right? Like she also watched like Days of Our Lives, and I really got into that storyline too. And so she had on this Lifetime movie, and there was this mother and her daughter, and they were homeless, and they were living like literally in a cardboard box. And so in my child brain, I sort of imprinted like, oh my gosh, like if we don't have enough money, then we have to live in a cardboard box. Like that story just became one in my mind. I remember this one day, my dad got home in the middle of the day. And I remember my mom was sitting on the couch, and she was with us, my brother and I, and she went like immediately, the tone of her voice was like, "Why are you home?" And my dad had gotten laid off. And so he got home in the middle of the day, and it was like this super traumatic thing because my mom got totally triggered, and she reacted and was like, what are we going to do? And they were also buying our house. We were moving. And so we're in the middle of like moving to our home, right? Like my parents' dream home. And my dad just lost his job. And I remember this moment of just like being super afraid, and I didn't understand what any of these things meant, right? It's not like I knew like what a mortgage cost or how much money my parents even made or any of those things. But I just remember I remember the feeling in the room was one of like the bottom falling out. And all I could imagine was my family having to live in a cardboard box. It was like the way that my story sort of synced up in my childhood brain. I remember just thinking to myself, Erin, like, am I going to be able to bring my cat with me? Like he'll get lost. Like I'm going to lose my cat because he can't go outside. I mean, literally, right? So it's so sad, but like it was so real for me, and nobody knew it. So my parents didn't know that I was having this experience and making this my truth. They didn't talk to us about it. They didn't, and in a sense, like, why would they, right? They didn't understand that I was having this whole world of an experience. And so, we didn't end up living in a cardboard box at all. We moved into the house. My parents figured it out. My mom ended up getting a lot of jobs, and they were working it. But there was just a lot of suffering as it related to money, like a lot of emotional feelings of like abandonment, feelings of being alone. And I really look at the way this story connected. It was like the way our world was set up, Erin, was trying to make enough money to survive.
Yeah.
And that became sort of like the foundational story. And there would be things like, dad was working on the weekends at ski sales, and so he couldn't come to things. Or my mom had to, go do, she'd work 3 jobs and she couldn't come to things. And so I think it's just really important for us. And then I talk about in the book, in the Money Memory Lane chapter, around we have to go back and look at the stories, these foundational stories, these first memories that relate to money, because you will find enormous clarity and information that perhaps you never accessed before, that have become subconscious programs in your brain that are now the reality of what you are living out as an adult, right? Trying to grow to your next level. And you're being triggered by these memories that are still sort of installed in the hard drive.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, what a story. And isn't it interesting the specificity of the detail with the cat and the
Yes.
box? And I mean, you just took us right back there. And we all have a story like that
Right.
from our childhood where the details are so randomly specific that they couldn't have been engineered. Like they're so burned into our psyche. And when I was reading chapter 2 of this book, which it's called Your Money Memory Lane, I had never even considered why I was programmed the way I was with money. And it's such an interesting exercise. And highlighters, as you go through this book that Amber has graciously shared with the world, I mean, it really is interesting. And for me, my insight that surfaced that has really honestly changed how I've been thinking about my fiscal goals this year and beyond is that really, I mean, I'm the first generation of women in my family where I've had independence and control of my own finances. Like my mom stayed home and raised us, and her mom was an immigrant from Ireland who raised all the kids, and her husband was the plasterer. And before that, so if you think about these women that we've descended from generation after generation, I'm the first one in my line where my money has been my own. I mean, that's a really crazy path to pioneer.
Yes.
And just the way that my family talked about money with the guys versus the girls, you know, like the topics that were broached with my brother and my male cousins versus the gals, there was sort of this unwritten narrative that it wasn't as much for us to worry about. You know, it wasn't considered to be as critical to our formation as maybe other lessons like how we looked, how we presented ourselves, you know, how we hosted. I mean, it sounds so old school in 2022, but it really is an interesting exercise to dive back and say, gosh, why do I feel so like I'm looking to my husband or I'm looking to someone else to help me figure this out? Like, why don't I feel like I'm authorizing myself to really drive my money story? And it's because I realized as a kid, I never saw a woman doing that. So it was really interesting for me. And so the book has so many breakthroughs like that everyone can start to unpack and peel back. What I love about your book is you really start off with the big vision. And the big vision is so much easier said than done, which you're basically challenging us, like, not just the amount of money you want to make, not just the clients you want to have. Like, you're like, what do you really want? How do we start to figure that out if maybe we've never set out to define that specifically, or we don't really know?
Yeah. I mean, I think the reality is that we do know, we just don't give ourselves permission to be honest about it. And that's the big part of it, is that programming that's in the hard drive, right? Around, and I remember as I was growing our wealth and having more success as an entrepreneur, and very much like you, the first female in my family that was moving in this direction and choosing to, being the breadwinner in my family and all of that. I mean, these are all new paradigms that I'm having to sort of navigate and explore without any reference points, of anything I've seen historically in my own family lineage. And so I remember growing up, there were stories and there was messaging around wealthy people being greedy and bad. Right. It's like, oh, they have to have that. Oh, they're such show offs. Oh, they have to, and there was a lot of messaging around that. And that also goes up against a lot of what you were just saying. Like, I don't want anyone to think that I'm bad or greedy or a show off or any of those things. Right. If anything, I always tried to minimize that. Like, don't shine too bright. Like, don't be too beautiful. Don't be too big and bold and bodacious. Like, hide, cover up, minimize. And so isn't it so cool that this conversation about money is inviting us into looking at the ways in which we're doing that in other aspects of our life? And money is just, an invitation in this instance. Money is just an opportunity for us, because at the end of the day, money is just a tool. You've heard this before. Money feels how you feel. money is going to move with the energetic of where you are. And so if you're in a place of constriction and don't look at me and I need to make myself smaller, oftentimes the bank account is going to reflect that as well. And so when we come back around to your question of what do I really want and how do I get into that? I think the doorway that really works for me when I feel that resistance of like, I'm not sure what I want, I'll ask myself almost the opposite of the question and say, what am I not allowing myself to receive? And then once you answer that, you can go, why? Because what does it mean for me to receive more abundance and wealth? What does it mean for me to have a best-selling book and to have my face on a big stage screen with a lot of people looking at it, right? Like this is really about receiving, sisters. And so where are we holding back on our capacity for receiving? And I can guarantee you, if you ask that question, you really take the time to be still and pause with yourself to look at that and why, you will find inside of it the true desire, the thing you actually want. And I am a firm believer that our desires, and I just actually posted this today, our desires are the doorway to our dreams, to the bigger dream that we want to live into. And desire is also a touchy topic for a lot of us, right? But the truth of truth is, and let me just put us all out of our worry here, to be human is to desire. You are going to be hungry later for your next meal. You are going to desire sunshine and water and exhilaration and satisfaction and pleasure. And you're going to experience and desire more. It is just part of being here. So what if we can normalize that? And even better, let's turn the dial up and actually enjoy the experience of being a desiring being that gets to live here in these sensory, containers, vessels that we call bodies.
Well, Amber, it's such a radical challenge that you're issuing, and one that feels, even just my body language when you were talking to me, I was kind of like, oh my God, are we allowed to do that? Like, I mean, there's something that is just, it's so interesting that we can override our knee-jerk reaction to a challenge like that. And it's interesting because I was reading this book and you have all these great chapters around, there's a habit that's holding us hostage to our purpose and how money's energy. And there's so many nuggets that we're going to unpack hopefully today from the book. But there was a part where you kind of issue a challenge of speaking your truth and using the words to be okay with those around you, knowing this is important to you and being unapologetic about that. So I took the challenge. And not like it's always our mom's fault, which I'm realizing my second reference to my poor mom, but sorry, Helen, love you. But we did have a conversation and I had just started to sort of be more intentional around, well, how do I become better at receiving? And what is holding me back from feeling like I deserve to break through a certain plateau, to quit these self-sabotaging cycles around fiscal earning. And I was talking about it because I found it so interesting. And my mom, bless her, made a comment and she was like, I just want you to be aware, like you're talking about money a lot lately. And she didn't mean it in a, she's my mom, but she's kind of a little bit like check yourself before you wreck yourself was sort of the tone. And again, it was like, okay, I'm 39 years old. I'm studying this. I'm aware of what's happening. And yet that comment from my mom kind of made me stutter step a little bit. And so there's really an audaciousness that accompanies this where in a polite way, there's also a bit of like, thanks for your opinion, but no thanks, this is my journey, and that's kind of a tricky thing too, to sever that need for approval and good job you. And figure out how to sort of pat yourself on the back for that bank account balance. And for me, that's been a challenge. That's why I love, the wisdom in our words and the fact that you talk about being a money magnet and energy is everything. But I guess there's a big piece of this that I've learned where releasing this expectation around everyone cheering you on while you're doing it.
Yes. And I think, let's look at the legacy of our lineage and acknowledge where the generations that helped us to get to where we are to sit in these chairs and have this conversation, where they came from. Yeah. And I think with the programming of that very traditional way of communicating, it's like society was so different then. So we can't expect them to understand in the same way that our kids can expect us to just like totally get it, with TikTok and these like fun things that they're doing. Like it's taking me a minute. Like I joke around about being like a grandma on TikTok. And I want you to laugh with me on this one. This is hysterical. So I have my own TikTok, but I like hardly really use it. So I have like, I don't know, 90 followers or something on TikTok. I've just like very haphazardly created some things, just like, having stops and starts. But my daughter and I started a TikTok for our cats. And we have like almost 500 followers for the cats in like a week. And so isn't that hysterical? And the learning curve has been hilarious and also very challenging. And so I use that as a lighthearted example, but I think it's same in a way. And when we're talking about grandparents, actual grandparents, like not great grandparents, yes, great grandparents too, but great grandparents, which is just 2 generations away from you and me, coming over the ocean on boats. To then set up a life here and create a legacy that made it possible for us to do what we do now. I have an enormous depth of reverence and appreciation and a feeling of being called in this lifetime to honor the majesty of that lineage, and to understand that part of humanity's evolution and us as women evolving into our next iteration is normalizing the conversation around money, because there is not equity in our society, right? That is not a thing right now. It's still not. And that humanity has to continue to evolve. We have to find out where we're going to meet in the middle on this. And as women, as sisters, like this is, if you're feeling that tap to learn this and to share it and to open those conversations over the dinner table with people that you love and to invite them into a different perspective, you're actually doing them a huge favor. And you're actually doing your children and your future children and their future children a huge favor. So I invite you to be courageous in the face of that wobble that we feel there, and to acknowledge that was a different time and things were very different there. And normalizing a new way is not necessarily a bad thing. It is called evolution, growth, and expansion.
Well said. Well, highlighters, if you're listening to Amber right now, I have chills on my arms, and I am going to take that challenge and embrace the wobble. And I think it's a great segue. Before we talk about what we can start doing, let's dive a little bit into the habit holding us hostage. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Well, I think that just remember, and you all know this already, because I know everybody here is into growth and personal development. You wouldn't be listening to this if that wasn't you. So we know that there's a negativity bias just involved in being a human. It's part of our DNA. It's encoded in us. And that's a good thing because it keeps us alive in many ways, right? Like, ooh, that might not be a good idea to go, pet the saber-toothed tiger. But the challenge is that this negative thinking, this sort of bias that we have towards negativity, becomes a habit that we infuse into everything that we're doing. And we fail to discern. And I also think, we inherit it in some ways around subjects like money. And as you so beautifully illustrated, and we perpetuate it through these behaviors that keep it firmly entrenched. And then we wonder, why what we want isn't coming to fruition. And then we feel frustrated. And it's like, well, but you woke up and you were doubting yourself the second your feet hit the floor, and you were frustrated because you ran out of coffee beans, and you were, you turned on the news and started listening to what was being said there. And you're just pumped up with like this energetic of doubt and discouragement. And then you judge yourself for that. And so how about like, oh, that's a lot. Like, let's just breathe that one out. Let's instead start our day with the energetic that we actually want to feel. Let's get on the wave of where we really want to be, acknowledging that, oh, I'm going to dip. I'm going to feel moments of like, oh shoot, I tripped, I skinned my knee, and now I'm having the worst day ever. Right? Well, maybe you're not. Right? Maybe you're not. But until we can acknowledge that, that the ways in which we do this, especially with money, Erin, right? It's like, oh, that person asked for a refund. Oh, great. Everything's failing. Or my launch didn't go the way I wanted it to go. Or the bonuses aren't happening this year in our corporation. Or that lead that I was so excited about said no. And then we permeate that outward to mean something about what's possible for us in our finances, in our ability to serve and grow and connect and all these things. And so that's really like at the root, that is a habit of always kind of having the Eeyore perspective on things, always having the like overprotection with the shield and the negativity.
Yeah.
And I want to say to us, like, let's flip up the beach blanket. Let's shake the sand off of that thing. Let's get it fresh again. And let's start over. And a really beautiful doorway, and I share this in the book, is, just open it with gratitude.
Yeah.
Just open up. I'm so grateful for this opportunity to learn right now. I'm so grateful for this opportunity to have this level of clarity. I'm so grateful for what is coming forth that I can't see right now, but I trust the miracle. I know more is coming. I know more is coming. There's always been more. There always will be more, right? I'm never going to get to the end of it. I'm just always opening to receive what is on its way to me.
Yeah.
Giving gratitude, pre-paving that can really change the whole, honestly, it shifts your life on its axis.
And it's interesting because the affirmations that you were just sort of channeling there, we really do have that choice of, if we are feeling that we're slipping into that scarcity world, we aren't stuck there. Okay, you dip a toe into scarcity town, but then you have those mantras, those affirmations, those anchors, and you choose to override it and get your ass right back in abundance where you belong. Yeah. And it's a choice. And I love that. But see, even how you just right there, you were almost walking us through exactly your process. Like those affirmations came to you like this. And so I don't have mine on demand like that. Like I couldn't call them up as fast as you just did. And I feel like it's such a great exercise, such a phenomenal little tool that you just had right there that you just illustrated, that I certainly can't wait to get better at doing. So it's a really, really good segue. You talk about like the wisdom in our words, which you're the way that you write and the way that you speak, you're such an incredible linguist. I love your word choice. But all of us can get better at that word choice. And even, my husband, Hartman, he has worked in finance his whole career. So he was a CFO of a restaurant group. He's been a trader. He's been an investor. He's been on the Chicago Board of Trade. So he is a spreadsheets, numbers, practical guy. And when I start getting in flow with my money manifestation, and when I start to attract, like I've already visualized the 5 clients and I see them saying yes, and I see us hugging, and I see us going to this place, and I do all these things. Well, he'll look at the bank sheet and be like, yeah, but we haven't gotten deposits yet. So technically we don't have that $200,000 that you think we already have. And I'm like, but it's coming, it's coming. And so there's always this like tension that I have in my relationship between where I know I'm going, where I can feel I'm attracting, and then sort of having to really protect that when you have a partner, which oftentimes if it's a guy, maybe they're more practical. It's a huge generalization, but maybe they're more of numbers and spreadsheets. And
yeah, that's good.
So how do we become more intentional about sort of protecting the journey that we're on, but maybe when we're in a partnership or a relationship where the way that they see it going down, like I feel like he's always playing defense. Yeah. And I'm always playing offense. And as a fellow college athlete, I know we love a good sports analogy, but I mean, really it's a tricky balance to strike.
I think that we are brought our perfect partner for the experience of life that we're meant to have. And so, I am a woman, I lead with my feminine energy, but I also have masculine energy and capacity for that too. With every single person, whether you're a man or a woman, you have the and both in that. No matter what your gender looks like, we all have that divine masculine, divine feminine, and a different, sort of equation in terms of where we spend the most time. And so why I'm saying this is because if your style is to manifest and move into the energetic of money, to become the energetic of the vision, to commune with it, especially as a creative, because that's what you are, right? That is actually like you in your skill and in your gift. And if you are someone who is more numbers based and likes to look at the spreadsheets and likes to map those things out, and that like gets you excited, then that's your style. That's your modality. That's your method of teaching, right? There's certain keynote speakers where their whole talk is about research. They point back to research. And then there are keynote speakers they might weave some bits and pieces of that in, but share a lot of stories from the journey, and story that's more qualitative in nature, and bring people on the inspirational journey. At the end of the day, we're both going to get to an end result that is probably equally amazing, but the pathway to get there is different. And so I think it's like with our partners, reminding them that, honey, this is your strength. And that's a really important pillar in our partnership. And this is mine, right? Like Ben and I have this dynamic where I say, he's like the rock to my roll. And that's us. Like he's the rock and I'm the roll. And it's just always that way. And there can be moments where he's going to roll and I'm going to be the rock. But I think that, you have to normalize where you fit in the relationship, what your role is to play, what you bring to the team, and amplify and celebrate that. Because at the end of the day, waiting for them to do that for you it's never going to feel as fulfilling as you saying, yeah, this is how I do it. This is how I experience money. And look at the gifts we can both give to each other by showing our various perspectives, and thus then having a more diverse approach to things like money and manifestation.
It's so good. And you talk about this, like, what is the power of the present action, the present moment, the present mindset, grounding yourself not in what was or what could be, but being really intentional about what's controlling the controllables for today.
Right.
And you have this concept that the visual is so strong. You say we should be a money magnet. And I love that visual of just everything that you are doing and saying and moving towards is seeking you. So can you share with us a little bit more? Like, what if we don't feel like a money magnet? Like, what if we just got chopped around in the stock market, let's say, hypothetically speaking, this week, or, something happens in it and it kind of knocks us down off of our flow and off of our journey? How can we sort of, like, is there a trigger that you use to kind of remind yourself, no, this is seeking me as much as I'm seeking it? Like, how can we be a money magnet?
Yeah. So what I like to think about, and you use the stock market as an example, and I think that's such a good example. Like, the reality is we all know that the stock market can drop, but we all know that the stock market can rise, right? In incredible ways. Like, if you've been around long enough, you've watched that happen. And the reality is as far as I know, I'm knocking on wood here, but it always rises at some point. And so it's a matter of just knowing that and trusting that. And when it comes to like your own personal stock market and the ways in which you are navigating through your financial reality, I like to think of this formula that I share in the book. And I say this line all the time: if the dream is in you, it's for you. And I fully believe that to be true, that if you have a dream, there is a reason for it. And it is inexplicable. It is unique. It is probably bewildering and confusing at times, but I just invite you to lean into it, because on the other side of that dream, or at least through the hallways and corridors of walking towards it, you're going to learn a lot along the way. And so my whole thing is like, what is your mission here? What are you on purpose for? Like, what are you meant to create? What are you meant to commit to? And it doesn't have to be, a multiple six-figure business. It doesn't have to be, at the top of your company's chart. You could literally, be making crafts at home and then selling them on Etsy. You could be doing any kinds of things, walking dogs, like creating things. But like, how are you influencing through your mission in this lifetime, through what your heart is leading you to do? Okay, so you have your mission, and then you get in motion on your mission, right? So you get in motion on the mission, and in doing so, that's where you create momentum, because momentum is just the result of sustained motion. And we have to amplify, we have to activate, we have to take our mission and get it into motion in order to create momentum. Once you've got momentum in place, right, that's when the magnetism happens. So you have to be willing to take that step. You have to be willing to try something. You have to be willing to move on behalf of the mission, on behalf of the dream, in order to get to the energetic of magnetism. And once you get to that, once you're like doing all that, you got the magnetism happening, that's when the miracles, that's when the money, that's when the magic, that's when all the fun starts to come in. And you also start to get a pace going where you begin to fine tune it. And you get to say, okay, but now I'm being called to move in this direction. And you get in that flow state, Erin. And so that's the sort of framework that I like to invite people into. But the most important thing, and that's why I started the whole book with vision. It's really about, what are you here to do? Who are you here to be? How are you here to impact and love on people and expand humanity? And if you can do that, even if it's, working behind the counter at the donut shop and making people smile every day, and enjoying your experience there, guess what? You're probably going to get a raise. You're probably going to get elevated in that company because you are making an impact on the experience of the customers at the donut shop. Everyone has the capacity to influence change and expansion and to get to magnetism, but it is an inside job.
Amber, it's so well said. And I just can't thank you enough for sharing that perspective with my highlighters. I mean, so many of us, I hear this over and over again. Some of us are so great at the manifestation part and the visualization, and then we just kind of zen, namaste, wait for it to unfold, like trust the process a little too much, right? Then you have your activists that are just banging out the tasks, banging out to-do lists, and they're just operating and operating. But like the motion, the activity isn't necessarily productivity because they're not setting the vision casting. They're not, plugging into the energetic component. And I love this book and this framework that you just so beautifully articulated for us, Amber, because it allows people who struggle with being stronger with one or the other to sort of better exist at that powerful intersection. And you do need both. And this book is an excellent roadmap and guide to show people how to do exactly that. So I cannot wait for everyone to read it. Guys, Amber Lilyestrom, a fantastic author, speaker, coach. Her programs are insane. Her book is available at amberlilyestrom.com. We'll link to it in the show notes. And I just want to close with a phenomenal quote that you open your book with. I'm just going to read you your own words because I love your writing style. Amber says, "To each of us who is committed to rewriting our money story, reclaiming the truth of ourselves, and living a wildly abundant life." And that is what I hope for all of you. I hope for each of us. Amber, thank you so, so much for spending time with us today. You are such a gem. I'm so thankful that we have crossed paths, and I just honor our friendship. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Erin. I appreciate you.